Here, Dr. Stephen McDonald is an emergency medicine physician in New York City. Dr. McDonald, it's great to have you on today. I was looking through some of the numbers in the city right now, or New York State as a whole. We've got case counts, hospitalization rate, the deaths, all up roughly over 80% over the last 2 weeks. When you look at the specific city in New York City where you are obviously operating, what do you think has contributed to this sudden rise?
It's a great question. So far, Governor Cuomo seems to be calling this living room spread. So these are the small gatherings that you have at your home, in your living room, where you're with close friends or family in your quote unquote pod. But, if people are sharing pods or have not the same number of members, the spread can run rampant.
And doctor, the other thing that we've been talking about specifically when it comes to New York was kind of the schools reopening and that being clearly in focus here. We've heard kind of back and forth on the idea that schools might be something that people should be concerned about when it comes to community spread. What's been your diagnosis on the way that that's been handled there in New York, as we've seen kind of the start-stop being discussed?
Sure. So, it's difficult when New York City schools are controlled by one party, the mayor, and schools on a statewide level are controlled by Governor Cuomo. And so, it's frustrating when you see schools closing, but then indoor dining remaining opening, which is obviously a much bigger worry in terms of spread. I think it's good that we're getting the students back to school and hopefully doing it safely this week.
And Dr. McDonald, I wonder if you can speak to the very issue Zach and I were talking about right now, about which businesses should be operating, which should not. If you talk about dining, indoor dining certainly has been a concern, especially in the colder months. But outdoor dining, based on the data that you have, the science that you know, how significant has outdoor dining contributed to the actual spread in this most recent surge we've been seeing?
Sure. So we know that outdoor spread is about 1/20th as risky as indoor spread. So you would think, outdoor dining should be a relatively safe activity. That said, when you actually look at constitutes outdoor dining in New York City, a lot of these restaurants have put up structures that are questionably outdoors any longer. They're supposed to be open on at least one side. I think two is best for ventilation. And now we're seeing many that are actually completely enclosed structures. So that does raise a question of what actually is outdoor dining any longer and how much is this contributing to spread.
Yeah, you can't really fault these businesses for trying to do all this stuff since they had some time to try and get some of these things in place. And still, as I said earlier, still waiting to see what's going to happen on the PPP front. But when we talk about where this is coming from at a national level, since those numbers are important to discuss, and we saw, the first wave of all this was where you are in the Northeast. Then we saw it spread across kind of the Midwest here in the U.S. But now it seems like the Northeast is in a bit of a danger zone itself, since New York is seeing spread in the neighboring states. And we've talked about how states themselves are going to have to put in some policies to protect against neighboring states here. But how impossible is that when we think about how Americans are traveling, especially around the holidays, where state by state may not be the best way to look at the numbers?
This has been a problem throughout the entirety of the pandemic. New York State has had its quarantine list for some time now. And yet what we see is that, and what I at least see in the hospital frequently, is people come from other states. They don't adhere to the quarantine recommendations. They don't get testing on a recommended time scale. And then they turn out to have coronavirus and are subsequently infecting many New Yorkers with the virus. And so, these laws are very difficult to uphold and to enforce. So we really just have to ask people to please comply. It's begging, essentially.
Yeah, and we have heard that call from so many different leaders across the country. Dr. Stephen McDonald, an emergency medicine physician practicing in New York City. It's good to talk to you today.
Likewise. Thank you.